Welcome, everybody. Today's session is formation damage in unconventionals, fluid variables. And we were intending to start right on time here at 11, so I'll help kick things off. So welcome again to formation damage in the unconventionals. My name is Kirk Graham, and I'll be your host today. And our presenter is Adam Fair. Now, before we get going, we're letting a few people continue to join. I thought I'd go through some housekeeping items. And first up, exciting things on the horizon. So we have another webinar that we've scheduled for August 15th, and that is PVT Reports Demystified, a conversation between a modeler and an experimentalist to peel back the onion of 100 years of history, methods, and assumptions. So our guests are going to be Whitson's Marcus Hayes Nielsen and Interface's Ali Abedini. And they'll discuss the most important pieces of a PVT report. It should be a lot of fun and really enlightening. Marcus, depth of knowledge there and really dynamic speaker. And of course, our own EVP, Ali, it will be on that session as well. The other big event that I know, and I can see some of you are members of the SBE in that list as well. I recognize a few names. We're celebrating our 100th year anniversary of the ATCE, and that'll take place, as many of you already know and are probably registered for, in New Orleans, September 23rd to 25th. We'll be there. And if you want to know about our presence there or contact us, there's a landing page we've designed for that. We'll have a demo unit of our Sapphire Lab on site, and you can speak to one of our experts in a one-on-one environment about your specific curiosities and needs within the energy industry. So those are our upcoming events. We also wanted to point out that this is an evolving series we're doing on water. It's been becoming increasingly important to really understand water, and today we're going to dive into some of those complexities. But there's a great webinar that preceded this one called Produced Water Explained and Getting It Right. And there's a lot of really valuable content in there. We lay out a lot of the foundational pieces that we're building upon today and in future webinars. So I encourage you to either use the QR code or go to interfacefluidics.com/resources. And you can kind of see, if you come to our main website and you click resources at the top of the page, you'll come to a new inventory layout of our brochures and case studies and webinars, our wealth of content that we've published through SPE and other academic journals, as well as our webinars as well. So I appreciate that. Today's presenter, well, first, welcome. But today's presenter is Adam Fair. Welcome, Adam. So Adam is really passionate about chemistry, and it's infectious. I think those of you that saw our previous webinar where Adam and Stuart were talking about produced water got us a flavor for that. And understanding how chemistry behaves is fascinating. How could it not be? But getting in to know Adam even better, I know how he appreciates those practical elements of what building a solid understanding underpinned by what good measurements and data can really have to a business, that impact, and that's substantial. Adam was educated right here in Southern Alberta at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology and has held positions at the University of Calgary and professionally across different labs as well. And Adam's an experienced lab professional, really hands-on experience as well, and joined the Interface team in 2023. Now, Adam helps our clients and partners understand how to apply microfluidics to their operations. And that could be service companies or research departments or E&P companies, operators, a wide variety of experience in his role and challenges that really makes him well positioned to be somebody to kind of talk about where you might like to take microfluidics and how it might provide value to your organization. But in today's session, Adam's going to guide us through the mechanisms of formation damage affecting the unconventional sector. And as we evolve our understanding of how to best manage unconventional resources, we've come a long way in a decade, but we've got a long way to still go. We know fluids matter, and fluids matter all through the different stages, whether you're piloting, commercialization, development, abandonment, divestiture. We have a role to understand fluids across all of those life parts of that asset life cycle in energy as well. So today we're asking you to kind of tuck into some difficulty, tuck into complexity, and understand that. But we're also coming out with a clear sense of how to manage that once we become aware of it. So I think today's session will be really valuable for all of us. So, Adam, today, what are we really going to be talking about?
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction, Kirk. Thanks for joining everyone. Today I plan to talk about, the most common causes of formation damage caused by fluids that we've been able to observe at Interface Fluidics using one of our tests called the flowback test. And we're going to discuss how the base fluid, the water, actually impacts the performance of the chemistry that we're intending to use to enhance hydrocarbon flowback during hydraulic fracturing. And we'll talk about the different approaches that completions teams already implement and should maybe consider in the future before implementing a chemistry program for hydraulic fracturing and stimulation. Before we get into that, though, just a really quick introduction to Interface Fluidics for those who aren't already familiar. We're a laboratory technology company that provides testing services and equipment to the energy sector. So that includes chemical providers and producers, academia as well. So what Interface Fluidics is really based on, our company is based on a technology called microfluidics. And our instrument platform is called Sapphire Lab. And it is just a microfluidic instrument that has been tailored to the needs of the energy sector. More specifically, upstream and midstream companies. So we do serve both unconventional and conventional markets, but obviously today we'll be talking about the unconventionals. Interface Fluidics' goal is really to make testing more accessible and specifically to make more types of testing accessible to anyone who might need to branch away or branch out from all of the good methods that are already available in our tool belts. And the reason that Interface Fluidics uses microfluidics to do these types of tests that we're going to be talking about today is because microfluidics is all it really is just studying how fluids move through very small channels. And it's great for isolating fluid variables and fluid-fluid interactions. And it's commonly used in industries and applications requiring like robust repeatability and reliability. So things like pregnancy tests and blood glucose test strips. And you've already come across microfluidics in your daily life in the form of inkjet printers for sure. But there's all sorts of other scientific applications that have been explored in the biomedical space. The history of using microfluidics in oil and gas is, we're not the first ones to do this. Academia has been using micromodels since the mid 20th century. Actually, the first article that was ever published on the topic is what you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen here. Ever see a water flood? So microfluidics was applied in this case to look at the pore scale displacement of oil in basically some capillary channels. We've taken it to another level by introducing pore scale heterogeneity and tried to make our devices a little bit more robust towards pressure and temperature. So in that way, we can be slightly more representative of what's going on in the subsurface. But to kick today's topics off, as Kirk already mentioned, fluids are really important because they play a critical role in preserving the production potential of an asset. I mean, there are a lot of levers that decision makers can pull to optimize an operation in terms of well spacing or other, geological parameters that need to be considered when completing a well or drilling a well. But without paying attention to your proper fluids, all of that effort could be slightly diminished or diminished greatly by the fluids that you're using. And this is particularly true for the unconventionals because we're dealing with extremely tight formation formations that are sensitive to damage, and they've got a shorter production lifespan when compared to conventional assets. So making the most of each production opportunity is paramount. So the reason that I really wanted to focus on formation damage mechanisms today was because sometimes the actual causes can be somewhat counterintuitive, and we need more performance-based testing because the actual testing options out there are somewhat limited in terms of just the number of different tests that are available on the market for testing different completion fluids. So at Interface, obviously, we're trying to make things a little bit more accessible and approach the problem from a couple different angles. And when I talk about performance, chemicals are evaluated in multiple different ways, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But ultimately, I think what everybody wants to know when they're looking at a completions fluid package is how will these different chemistries impact the ability for me to produce hydrocarbons at the end of the day. That's what I mean by performance-based testing. Performance is how much oil can we really squeeze out of this thing. So in terms of what formation damage is, I think, we could all agree that it's very simply put, it's a reduction of permeability overall. There's also different types of formation damage that might actually be physical damage to the rock. I'm thinking particularly about clay swelling or unstable reactive shales. But also the fluids that are inside the reservoir interact with the completion fluids that we're using. And anytime there is like an adverse kind of situation where you're diminishing returns from a particular asset, you're essentially doing damage to the system. And overall, we've got some specific tests that look at, for example, regained conductivity, where we're looking at the pressure drop of one fluid and comparing it to a completion fluid chemical to evaluate the damage factor in the porous media. But in today's test, we'll be looking at very specifically how that impacts oil production in our flowback test. So the question needs to be asked, what components of completion fluids can cause damage, and which components of completion fluids can actually prevent it? And we'll go through some interesting examples today of both of those case scenarios. But there's a long list of ingredients that we commonly see in the completion fluids we test. And I'm not going to list through each one, but I think what's important to recognize is that a chemistry package, once it's in the base fluid that you plan to use, is actually a really complex mixture of many different components. And each of those components has its own character in terms of its charge and its phase behavior and reactivity. So because the fluid additive or the fluids packages themselves are so complex in terms of their composition, many different interactions can arise. And I've listed a couple binary interactions here, like base fluid and formation fluid interactions. So think of incompatible mixing waters and scaling tendency. Think of chemical incompatibility with your base fluids. That's another binary interaction that can occur. But also the different chemical components, since you've got so many of them, they can actually interact with each other as well, which is another binary interaction. But the reality is, these interactions, they can be binary, but most of the times they're actually multivariate, and they all kind of work together to create a specific situation that needs to be understood before implementing a chemistry package. So how do we understand those phenomena then? There are multiple different approaches to testing. I've highlighted two here that I would consider to be performance-based, where we're actually looking at how does this fluid impact my ability to flow oil. The Amit cell and column drainage test is a great test for looking at the efficacy of a surfactant. And it's great because it represents the true geology if you're using, crushed core samples from a particular asset. But it relies on drainage. It's not necessarily a flowing system. It's all a spontaneous process when we're doing ambit cell and column drainage testing. And then core flooding in shale is also, I guess it could be kind of considered the gold standard. It's the gold standard certainly for the conventionals, but when it comes to the unconventionals, new challenges arise for the same reason that we encounter challenges in the field, because these porous media are actually extremely tight. And so when you try and engineer a test, what you end up with is very small core plugs and relatively high dead volumes in comparison to the pore space that you're trying to study. And you need to use extreme equipment for extreme pressures, right? So maybe even a tailored design system for doing tests with shale might be required, depending on how high the pressures need to go for you to begin moving fluids through them. And then there's the final question of how do you repeatably and accurately represent a fracture in a shale core plug? There are other tests too that are more focused on other performance-based metrics like regain permeability, return permeability. Many people have different names for it, but what I'm thinking about is sand pack testing or prop impact testing. And what it is it's a quantitative damage evaluation for your polymer or other additives that are used just to basically look at how they clean up in the porous media. And it's great for maybe making a selection in terms of evaluating how the polymers or whatever additive might clean up. But again, we're missing the what I consider to be the performance-based metric, which is how, at the end of the day, how does that impact your ability to flow oil from these really tight pore spaces in the shale? And then in terms of understanding compatibility, wet chem and bottle testing or test tube testing are really great because they're super fast and cheap. So they can be a great tool for initial screenings before you waste time and effort on doing things like core flooding or something else. But again, we're not providing insights into performance. And in some cases, the temperatures and pressures can't be elevated to a high enough degree unless this wet chem and bottle testing is being conducted inside of like a pressure vessel reactor system or something like that. And then it's no longer fast and cheap at that point, right? So what we really need is something that can provide the performance-based metric in a relatively repeatable manner that gives us good quality data. And when we speak about good data, we think about selectivity, right? I've mentioned this term performance-based testing already, and what I really want is to be selective for the impact to the ability to flow hydrocarbons in a really tight matrix. So that's what we could consider a selectivity in a test for the unconventionals. And then the next thing that is a hallmark of good data is being able to repeat the tests, right? That way you can kind of gauge the repeatability of the data that you are trying to use to make a decision, right? Things like making sure that if one technician runs the test versus another, they'll get the same result is really important. Otherwise, we don't know if the data we're looking at is based in artifact or if it's based in reality. The next thing that is really important for good data is isolating the variable properly that you want to study and making sure that there isn't other interferences introducing artifacts into the data. And different measurements are going to have different levels of control, and your experimental approach takes precedent here as well. How you're introducing different variables is very important for understanding their impact. And the last thing related to variable isolation is just understanding the assumptions that you've made when you're designing an experiment or a test. that are sometimes inherent to a measurement. There's no way to get away from it. Every test has its pros and cons, right? So you need to understand what assumptions have been made, which sacrifices have been made, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing that. Good data is also based on having representative samples, right? Especially when it comes to analytical work, no matter the quality of the test itself or how cool it is, if you don't have a representative sample that you're starting from, uh, you're you're going to be your results aren't going to reflect the situation in a representative way. And one of the highlights of doing tests in a core flood with proper shale is that you've got the pore scale confinement under reservoir conditions with reservoir fluids, hopefully. Um, but now we have to go back to repeatability. If we were going to take that core plug and try and do this experiment again, what's the approach there? How are we going to remimic those fractures? Are we going to be able to obtain a core plug that has very similar properties, etc.? Those considerations need to be made. And now the last hallmark of good data is who's actually doing the testing, right? Independent third parties have a role of helping folks make decisions without having any bias or influence from emotion. And that's why it's important to have an arm's length relationship between a testing organization and a supplier to make sure that there isn't any biases or favoritism going on. So how does interface fluidics provide good data to help folks make decisions? Well, like I already mentioned, we use our microfluidic platform to isolate the specific fluid variables of interest. And we do that in our microfluidic devices because they are essentially a repeatable porous media. We can manufacture the same porous media chip over and over again with the same specifications. So there's no variability in terms of the composition of the porous medium or its characteristics. And we can use that to study additives in isolation as part of a fluids package. So for example, this test is used very commonly to evaluate surfactants. So we might test a surfactant completely by itself in reservoir fluids, and then introduce complexity as we move through an evaluation by adding in the other components of a friction reducer package to eliminate certain interactions that we're going to talk about today. So that's the approach. The variable isolation comes from the experimental design and approach that is applied to designing a test matrix, really. And our recommended workflow is exactly that. You should study your additives in isolation and then introduce complexity over time to make sure that you don't pile on too many variables at once to keep essentially the signal to noise ratio high enough or at a high enough resolution that you can actually look at the data and be able to make decisions off of it because the results are distinct enough from each other, right? So the way that the test works today that we're going to be talking about is called flowback. The chip that you're looking at has a triangular region that has a relatively high contrast due to its larger pore spaces. That's trying to mimic like a proppant pack or a proppant network fracture. And the surrounding rectangle is the shale porous medium. There's pockets of oil in the shale to be able to evaluate displacement efficiency inside of that area because the channels themselves are actually really small. They can be sub 100 nanometer in terms of their depth. So we can't do visual analysis in the channels themselves because visual light, there's just a physics limitation. We can't see inside those. So we put the pores inside the shale matrix to be able to look at what's going on inside the shale. And I'll just play it again here. So what happens is the completion fluid or the stimulation fluid is injected from left to right through the proppant high permeability region, and it's allowed to kind of enter the shale if it wants to. And then a period of soaking is done to make sure the chemistry has been able to do its work. Then we reverse the flow direction from right to left. And instead of injecting a stimulation fluid, now we're actually injecting oil. And each of those three steps that I just mentioned, the injection, the soaking, and the flowback, are all done at a constant differential pressure for a fixed period of time. And what we find is that as we change out different variables or different components of a fluids package, the physical volume that is able to flow during that fixed period of time actually changes quite a bit. So let's start with your water. One of the most common causes of uh, damage that we see is actually just from base fluids. Mixing water it can be risky because those systems are all at equilibrium, and once you bring them together, things change and they want to reach equilibrium again. So that can mean all sorts of nasty things. It can mean scale deposition, it can mean reactivity. And so that's the first step of every project that we do, is making sure that we implement a control for the base fluids to see what the impact of the actual base fluids are going to have on the entire chemistry package as a whole. And then we can move on to actually doing chemistry selections and performance evaluations. Understanding water chemistry really helps avoid incompatible water mixing. And as Kirk already mentioned, we do have a dedicated webinar on this topic, Produced Water Getting It Right. It has a focus on folks who might want to reuse produced water in their operations. But it's good just overall in terms of understanding water chemistry and how it impacts these processes. There's tools that you can implement with having a really good water analysis report on both your formation water and injection water. You do thermodynamic modeling and things like that to understand if scale is going to be a problem. But again, the question needs to be raised. How is that going to impact the actual ability to produce oil? And that's where we come in. This is an image of an example of frac water incompatibility. And in this case, the chip was completely plugged off. There was massive scale deposition throughout the entire porous media and all of the channels leading to it. So this project quickly became a water optimization project rather than a chemistry focused project. The other thing that we oftentimes see is in situ emulsification. And this can be caused as a result of the inherent properties of the reservoir fluids, as well as incompatible chemicals as well. And here's the kind of first example of emulsification that's actually caused by chemistry. In this case, this is a brine control that we're talking about here. So mixing waters, making sure that the water is compatible and isn't causing any problems. It looks pretty clean from the images. You can see there's no solids depositing. The interfaces are very clear, but then when you look at chemistry 1 and chemistry 2 images, you can see that there is an emulsion being formed inside of the frac tip here. And how does that translate to production? Well, in terms of the control, if we compare the two different chemistries, you see a 10% reduction in the ability to move fluids through that chip. And for the second chemistry, almost 40% reduction in the ability to flow oil through that chip. And, this is something that can be avoided by just having some tools available to you to make sure that this doesn't happen in the field, right? You'd rather have it happen on a chip than in the field, that's for sure. But people are always quick to point to chemicals as the problem, but they oftentimes are actually a solution. Here, the control is again just water and oil, water and reservoir oil, and it has this natural tendency to form emulsions during the test. But once chemistry 1 is added, in both cases, you see very clean interfaces in the frac tip. There's no emulsion to be seen. And how does that impact oil production in this particular case? Here, the curve on the bottom right is actually normalized against Chem 1 additive 1 as the reference point. So the control where there's a natural tendency to form an emulsion has a negative 60% um, improvement over the control. So that begs the question then, why did Chem 1 additive 2 not actually uh, behave the same way as Chem 1 additive 1? Well, there's two components that we're looking at here, right? And that brings me to my next cause of formation damage that we have observed at interface fluidics, which is chemical-chemical interactions. Just because you've selected a flowback aid or a friction reducer or whatever, maybe it's even a biocide or something that's completely unrelated to enhancing your flowback characteristics. Um, the chemicals can interact with each other and diminish what should be advanced production at the end of the day. And here we can see that even though the interfaces are very clean inside the frac tip for chemistry 1 additive A and chemistry 1 additive B, there's probably some type of incompatibility that's resulting in the porous scale blockage in the really tiny channels that we probably can't even see it. So that's the next mechanism of formation damage, and it can be really frustrating because a lot of work goes into selecting individual ingredients that are used in the completion fluids package. But the reality is that these additives can play on each other's performance and diminish what should be advanced performance. And you end up looking like this little squirrel here, thinking, why did we even do this in the first place? When it comes to actually preventing this type of phenomena, like I mentioned right at the beginning, our approach is to screen these individual ingredients together and screen multiple of them so that you've got a few candidates to select as you introduce complexity. Perhaps some of the additives that you've selected might need to be ruled out for this exact reason because of chemical interactions. You need to figure out a backup plan, right? And that's where the screening of the individual ingredients comes in. Now you can go back to it, and you might ask, why not just screen everything together all at once in the beginning? Well, if that doesn't pan out well, there's a chance that that could work, but if it doesn't, where's your plan B? Where are you going to go from there, right? So, oftentimes I've talked a lot about different flowback aids and stuff here, but the reality is that all of those ingredients can have these types of interactions, like corrosion inhibitors and biocides can also impact the performance of the chemistries that you've selected to enhance your flowback characteristics. The next cause of formation damage in shale is waxes, and it does two things. It stabilizes emulsions, and then also if the wax is dropping out as crystals, obviously that's going to cause restrictions in your pore throats that are going to affect your ability to flow hydrocarbons back. And this is an example of it right here. This image is actually captured under cross-polar microscopy. So all of our tests, all of our apparatus have the ability to switch to a different filter where we're looking at things under cross-polar microscopy, where wax crystals will actually illuminate kind of like a star in the night sky. And you can see the wax crystals, they've been deposited inside of the pores that are in the shale matrix. See here and here for examples. But why does this happen? Well, oftentimes I've never seen any case of anyone injecting hot frac water. It's always cold. And if that cold water is cold enough to induce wax precipitation, that can obviously cause this type of damage. So in this particular study, we looked at doing our flowback test at multiple different temperatures to see what the impact would be on hydrocarbon production. And the next one is chemical degradation, or gummy bears, as it's so adorably called. The primary cause of this is going to be thermal degradation and then incompatible chemicals with the water. But when it comes to temperature, temperature is particularly dangerous because it accelerates reactions through kinetics, right? Higher temperatures mean faster reactions. And the thing that is often overlooked is that the many chemistries on the market that have been engineered to perform at high temperatures and pressures haven't necessarily also been screened with very complex water mixtures, or, and then again, add complexity to that in the presence of multiple other chemicals. So these compatibilities can still arise, these incompatibilities can still arise even with those types of engineered products. And it's so, like I said, it's important to understand where the process went wrong in the design of that particular fluids package. So starting with one ingredient or two ingredients and then adding complexity over time to see if things go wrong and where they go wrong so you can easily switch out that variable and make the right decision at the end of the day. Now, this is the chip images of the chip where we have observed this type of gummy bear production in our chip. I think this is a friction reducer combined with the surfactant that's degrading in the chip here, and that obviously causes a massive restriction. Um, and again, best to do this on the chip rather than in the field, right? So the next kind of formation damage mechanism that we oftentimes see at interface fluidics is overloading of chemistries that have been intended to enhance your production. I'm thinking specifically of surfactants, but not paying attention to chemical loadings. We oftentimes see diminished ability to flow oil back in our chip because of this, and that probably is translating one-to-one to the field. Like you can't implement specific chemistries without paying attention to loadings because you might be overspending on the chemical and then kind of hitting yourself again by actually diminishing your ability to produce the hydrocarbon, which is why you spent the money on the chemistry in the first place. And a good example of this is what the work that we did for Primex. They were, until they came to us, they were using sample P3 as a surfactant in their fluids. And they were using tap water or fresh water to do to make up the fluid, right? And they were using that surfactant at a concentration of 1.5 gallons per thousand. And we tested multiple surfactants for them in high TDS water, 91,000 TDS water, as well as fresh water at two different loadings, 0.5 GPT and 1.5 GPT. And what was really interesting about this work was seeing how basically 4 out of the 7 surfactants actually performed much better at 0.5 GPT than they did at 1.5 GPT in produced water. So this can again, without paying attention to your chemical loadings, you might actually just be shooting yourself in the foot. And you know, you're kind of burning the candle at both ends, really. You're spending this money on chemistry, and then on top of that, diminishing your ability to produce the money, so to speak. And you know, we're not necessarily experts on exactly why this is happening in these tight formations or in our chips. But we do believe it has something to do with the absorption of specifically surfactants inside of the small channels that shale has and that our chips have. And you're on the right-hand side, you're looking at a diagram of surfactants absorbing to the surface of a small channel here. And this diagram shows what is called a monolayer. So you can see the little ball and stick is the polar head of the surfactant, and the stick is, of course, the non-polar tail of it. But this is showing a monolayer. Oftentimes, surfactants don't just absorb in a monolayer, they absorb in multi-layers. So if this gets to be too much, especially in a tiny little pore throat, like an 80 nanometer pore throat, and you've got 5 to 10 nanometers of absorption, on every surface of that channel, well, now you're significantly restricting that pore throat and, as a consequence, its ability to flow anything. Um, so the other things that we learned from the Primex case study that we apply in most of our projects now is that um, chemical performance was not predictable based on freshwater performance. If I just go back to the last slide, there are actually many of these surfactants that perform quite a bit better in very salty water as opposed to fresh water, which is again quite counterintuitive, right? I think the general rule of thumb is that chemistries are supposed to perform better in fresh water than they're supposed to perform in salty water. So that's the other thing that we've learned from doing these tests over and over again. Um, the but the approaches that need to be considered before implementing a chemical package, especially when it comes to testing, is that every test on the market has its own pros and cons. I listed a lot of advantages of our flowback test today. Some of the things that probably we could consider to be like cons of the test are the time, right? Testing in the lab isn't necessarily going to be at the same time scale as the field. These operations go for a long period of time. But again, we're trying to have like a repeatable system here to do selections. And the other thing that really needs to be considered is that when you're doing these tests, really understand that the chemistries should be verified for performance independently first before introducing other variables and complexities so that you really understand where things went right and where things went wrong. And in terms of especially implementing surfactants, less is sometimes more. You really need to make sure that you've optimized your loadings before you do before you finalize a fluids package to prevent overspending on chemistry and diminishing your production. So you might have an ongoing operation or a chemistry fluids package that you plug and play into every single asset that you're working on. But over time, things will have to change, right? Your water sources are going to have to change. Perhaps a chemical vendor stops making a product that you've been relying on for a very long time, and now you need to change. That is a great time to come to us to de-risk the change, especially if you know that that fluids package is performing really well, then you've only got one variable to tinker with, right? The next reason that you should come to us is if you're seeing unexplained dips or inconsistencies in production between comparably completed wells. The chemicals oftentimes in our lab, when they're incompatible or when they have trouble having a reproducible result, it's because the chemical is actually introducing inconsistencies in the behavior. So you need to understand not only how much oil is coming out, but how reproducibly is that oil coming out of the chip? Because that could explain the unexplained inconsistencies that you're observing in the field. If you also feel that maybe the fluids that have been selected and used historically need to be further optimized, maybe there wasn't any attention paid to loadings of particular additives or the chemical interactions or other things that you feel might be wrong, I think that would be a great reason to come and chat with us as well to see how we could help out. So in conclusion, the probably the most common cause of formation damage that we've been able to see in our system is incompatible chemistry with base fluids. And then the next one is actually incompatible base fluids themselves. So chemical base fluid incompatibility is number one, and incompatible base fluids, so your injection water and your formation water mixing have a problem. The the fluids that are used in the field for completions are very complex, nuanced chemistry systems, but the base fluids also need to be considered carefully when you're designing that chemical package. A given chemical might perform extremely poorly in one base fluid while excelling in another, and sometimes in a counterintuitive way, just like we saw with Primex, where a lot of those surfactants performed better in very salty water as opposed to fresh water. And the other thing is that there are a multitude of variables that need that can drive success or create need for improvement. There's just so many variables that need to be considered when it comes to fluids and fluid chemistry. And the best way to obtain confidence around making sure that those variables are understood is to conduct performance-based testing. And each of those performance-based tests that I mentioned earlier have their own advantages and limitations. Without proper variable isolation, decision-making just becomes cumbersome and you will lack certainty that you've made the best choice possible. So let's do more testing rather than guessing and have some real data to back up the decisions that are being made. And that's it. That's all for me. I'll hand it back to Kirk now for
Yeah.
yeah.
And kind of handing it back to our audience, for whom I'm a bit of a conduit today, because there was a really active audience today in the chat session as well. But I really appreciate a lot of those points that you made today, Adam. They were really great for me. The variable control sticks out, and it sticks out again and again, right? Because we're sitting here and we're designing tests to help people really refine and control those variables. And there's often a tendency to add additional tests. That's fine, but let's make sure we understand what we're solving for. So I thought you brought that through loud and clear. So we have some questions that haven't been answered yet, but I thought I'd quickly just zip through and bring you and the rest of the audience up to speed on some of the questions, because I think you can add some additional commentary to them. The very first question, thanks Amin for posing it. In your flowback chip, how do you determine the improvement of performance of the reservoir? Is it based on increase in permeability, amount of oil recovery, or order of water blockage? So we answered that in typing in there that it was really kind of from that produced oil volume. But you have a slide, that flowback slide that was early in your slide deck. And I thought you might want to go back and even just kind of show an accumulation channel there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe talk in a little detail, because it's neat how we do that.
Sure. Yeah. I'll look at that test a little bit more in depth here.
Sorry, I should have gotten you your slide number while I was sitting in the background there. I think it's like 17 or something.
Okay. Oh,
18.
Yeah, so what happens again is we're doing the injection, right? We're injecting the chemical through the chip at a constant differential pressure for a fixed period of time. We're allowing it to soak to allow the chemistry to do its work. And then what happens is we're now reversing the direction of flow, and instead of injecting water-based fluids, we're injecting oil. So the amount of oil that we accumulate inside of this frac tip here and inside of the channels, these serpentine channels, we'll actually use image analysis to quantify the volume of that oil. And that is the way that we look at the impact of a particular variable on oil production in this particular test. So what ends up happening is we'll change one thing with the fluid, and this volume that you see accumulating in these serpentine channels actually changes quite dramatically as we switch out the particular component of interest.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There was another one. I'm going to do this one a little bit quickly because it was a fun point Lynn presented. Is in situ generated emulsification always a bad thing? Can it be used for mobility control? And with the help of Ali and Agram from my team, we kind of had a little chat on the side there. And sometimes it can improve an oil production rate, right? But it's also triggering that oil trapping mechanism in very tight pores that's relevant to shale, of course. But that trapping or blocking could be done with intention to block thief zones. However, really, in most of the experience we see, that in situ emulsification does produce formation damage. I don't know if you want to riff on that or if it sews it up for you, Adam, or we can move on
No,
to the
that was
next.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay,
they
yeah,
absolutely can be beneficial in very certain specific circumstances, like an engineered emulsion specifically.
yeah. I thought that was a great detail to kind of be like, hey, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. And then really looking at wax, right? Like we were talking about how we get the crystals to appear, but it was kind of brought up. Well, hey, like what about looking at that disappearance temperature as well? So that cooling and then heating back up. So to that response, we kind of commented that we have a wide range of tests that actually fall into a category of wax control. One to identify that appearance temperature, perhaps a disappearance temperature, but also what chemistry is going to help us address those challenges, whether it's a crystal modifier, an inhibitor, and it goes back to what you were talking about within those other contexts, right? Of what's the right amount, what's the right dosage and concentration to both be effective and economic at the same time.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we have dedicated tests that are designed to evaluate the performance of wax appearance and the crystal formation of it because of our ability to do cross-polar. And obviously, we can measure the wax appearance temperature as well as the wax disappearance temperature too. Yeah.
Now, I had some direct messages from those that preferred to hit a direct message versus have their name appear in the chat, but I'm going to read those out over here now. And perhaps you can scroll to the last slide just so that those that are in attendance can really see how to contact us if they do have a question after the session wraps here in a moment as well.
Sure.
Um, but there's kind of a general theme behind about three or four of these questions that are on the chip. It's kind of like, where did the chips come from? How do you design those chips? What's the lowest permeability you can mimic? What are they made of? And how do you like ensure they're representative of a real shale? Those kind of group together on like, help me understand the chip.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we design, first of all, the chip is made of silicon dioxide. That's the surface that's actually exposed to the fluids that we're testing. And the way that we actually make them is just by doing photolithography on silicon wafers. It's actually very similar to how semiconductors are manufactured using photolithography. So that's kind of how they're fabricated, but in terms of how we design them and ensure that they're representative, we rely on data inputs from geology labs and scale labs to be able to determine the depth, the pore throat geometries and things like that to make sure that it has like a representative tortuosity. And the other thing that we do to make sure that that chip is relatively representative is we can modify the wettability the same way that you would do it in a core plug just by aging oil. And then when we're talking about representative, it's important again to understand which variables you're trying to represent and which ones are being sacrificed in that effort, right? So that you can understand the pros and cons of each test. So in our case, we've got representative pore scale confinement, and in terms of the composition of the chip, it's made of silicon dioxide. Now, when we're talking about the unconventionals, shale is made of silicon dioxide and organic components as well. Maybe some pyrite and other minerals are thrown in there too, but overall, silicon dioxide is a reasonable representation of the surface chemistry of shale. And we apply that methodology to all of our reservoir analogs.
That's great. Kind of in that vein as well. You kind of opened it up a little bit as well. Do you want to just briefly discuss wettability on that chip? And because that kind of is often the next follow-up question that comes up when we see this.
Yeah, yeah. So the way that we measure wettability is because we have optical access to the chip, we can actually look at the contact angle of the oil and water on the surface of the glass using microscopy. So we've got this visual access throughout the course of the test, and we'll make a series of measurements. We'll look at all of the interfaces that we possibly can the interfaces need to be lined up on a straight channel inside the chip somewhere. So we purposefully put in little straight channels strategically in the chip in certain areas that we know. And then when we're doing microscopy, we'll zoom in on those. We'll look at the contact angles and see how they've changed. And then in terms of aging and getting the right wettability in the first place, it's the visual access that enables that again. We can load the oil onto the chip with and allow it to age over time and look at that interface as it's changing over time to make sure that we've reached the contact angle that we want to reach.
Well, that's funny. Somebody asked the wettability question. I didn't even see it in the channel. That's great. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
it's so yeah, thanks again for being so engaged. And I think we've got time for another question here as well. This one's interesting. How do you isolate a plugging issue? Right, this is kind of back to root cause. How do you isolate a plugging issue from something like incompatible water mixing or incompatible chemistry? How do you know what the root cause is? And maybe I like this question as well because it's kind of around variable control, but how would you answer that?
Yeah, that comes from your experimental approach, right? Introducing complexity over time. Like I said earlier, the first thing that we do in every one of our tests is looking at the base fluid compatibility. Because oftentimes people are very quick to point to chemistry as the problem. But it's base fluids can be a really big problem as well. So we want to rule that out right at the beginning because at that point, if we know that there are no other additives present and we're seeing plugging on the chip, that's then it's a pretty obvious answer. But you know, as we introduce complexity, we'll try to make sure that not too many variables are introduced at once, so that we can isolate it in that way, right? That way we can really confidently point to one thing or the other in making sure that the root cause that we've identified is correct.
Oh, Mohammed, amazing question. We actually have some. Well, anyway, I'm not going to give away the answer. Okay, I'm going to read it verbatim because it's really well composed. Adam, appreciate your presentation. It's an amazing study. Slide 37, please. So let's go check out slide 37. Have you ever tested surfactants, anionic, non-ionic, cationic, at different salt concentrations? CICA, NA. Fresh water is more effective than salt water, and in water chemistry, TDS is just one factor. The selection of the best surfactant depends on the fluid and the reservoir conditions. Low
Yes.
salinity or high salinity. He's speaking our love language. Yeah.
Yeah. So just what happens when we're a third party lab, right? So what happens is we receive chemistries and 90% of the time we have actually no idea what those chemicals are. But yes, the performance of a specific surfactant can be enhanced by salt or diminished by salt, depending on charge. Charge is a really important parameter when considering a surfactant. But at interface, we're blind to most of that unless people voluntarily give up that information. And as far as I know, we don't have any specific data that I can speak to right now in the context of this test on that
Right.
topic.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. It's but it is something that we see, right? And that kind of address
Yeah,
a
and that's
number of different
definitely
projects.
one of the first considerations any chemical provider is going to look at is charge compatibility.
Right. And perhaps even over time and just all those other ways that you can look at that compatibility. Yeah. Um, that's marvelous. Oh, I think just going to see one last question here. Thanks for the webinar. I'd like to know the effect of time is addressed on the process and the test for water compatibility and also wax appearance and deposition as well. Do you make periodic measurements at different waiting times? And generally, how do you scale the test results to long-term phenomena in the field life cycle?
Oh, that is well,
That could be a webinar. That's a good question.
that could be a whole webinar. Yeah, scaling it up, right? Um,
Yeah.
the reality is that if we could squeeze an entire oil field operation down into a little box and put it into a lab and do that entire process over, you know, the course of a year or a year and a half, to really understand all of that, that would be great. But we need to move through the selection process, right? Now, when we're talking about taking these results and understanding how they'll scale up with respect to time, that's where you'll need to speak with, the chemists and the thermodynamic modelers to understand what molecules you have, what are the reactive components, and to really get to nail down that question.
Let's
Because
call us. Let's talk about that project, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's get a flowback chip running for 2 years. I'm down for that.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's interesting because the scale, with the scale that we have, time, of course, um, is experienced differently on that small scale. So we are a little over time. I'm a stickler for finishing on time, people. So
Okay.
we're going to answer those additional questions later. But Adam, thanks again. I know that you put a lot of effort into this, and I could see the fun you had pulling it together and presenting, obviously. So it was great. And of course, the variable control, there was just a lot of great content there. So I appreciate that. And thanks again to all the attendees, really engaging. The webinar is going to be posted on YouTube shortly. And for those that have subscribed, you'll receive an email notifying you that it is available. But if you'd like to make sure that you're aware and alert of all of those updates, go to our website or our LinkedIn channel. It's pinned to the top, and you can subscribe to our newsletter where when these are scheduled, you'll be notified and able to consume that content and register for it. So again, you can also go to the resources section of our revised website at interfacefluidics.com, resources along the top, and that'll give you a list of not only our webinars, but a lot of that supporting material and content that we discussed today. So thanks again. The contact information for Adam is on the screen. You can also connect to us on social media, directly through our website, any way that you'd like. We'd love to hear from you with any thoughts, questions, comments, and what you'd like to see in the next webinar. So thanks again for attending, everyone. Adam, thanks again for presenting. Have a great day. Goodbye.